demons that had broken them. Now, blood rituals are the gory things to imagine.
I gotta go get some cream. I'm just gonna let Margaret Baker take for just 1 second.
Symbolism.
Margaret Baker,
because Leviticus chapter 16, verse 8 says that the goat that was sacrificed, whose blood was used to do this consecrating and cleansing, this goat represented the Lord. It's not how most English is translated, but that is how it was understood by Origen, the great early Christian scholar who died in 253 AD. He said the goat that was driven out into the wilderness represented the leader of the demons, and by implication, the goat that is sacrificed represents the Lord. And so here we have a temple ritual that represents, foreshadows, in the words of Hebrews, foreshadows the Lord giving his life to take away the effect of sin and to renew the great covenant of creation. And that, of course, is what Matthew is referring to.
Yeah, Margaret Barker hits. I haven't listened to too much of her, but some of the stuff she is saying is just really incredible, because she's talking about how Adam, he represents the priesthood, and the Melchizedek, the king priest. Remember, Aaron was told that he would speak for Moses, but lo and behold, because of the Deuteronomist or somewhere else around there, such as earlier, like as in Josiah, or later as in Ezra, but somewhere around there, kind of near the hypothetical time of Daniel, maybe, you have these Deuteronomical laws of blessing and cursing, and even exile. And a lot of people misunderstand the prophecies against the nations, because when it says the Philistines and the Egyptians and yada, 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 their judgment's coming, that's not some future judgment. This is what happened according to Isaiah under the Syrians, or according to Jeremiah under the Babylonians, where and even before this time, such as the invasions of the sea peoples, maybe even being the origin of the Philistines in the first, you have a time later where there aren't really Girgashites and stuff like that, when we're talking about the time of Moses coming back up, Remphraim or whatever, Rephanites or whatever they call them, and Hivites or whatever, but there were in time of Ezra, Egyptians and Philistines. And so even though Deuteronomy 7 isn't talking about Egyptians and Philistines, Ezra is using it to revise. So you got with Ezra and Josiah, especially second Esdras, an unveiling of a hidden law. And with all the wicked kings leading up into an exile, you'd wonder if there's a little bit of a Muhammad Joseph Smith thing going on, such that it's like, hey, look what I found, And when it comes to, let's say, the New Testament, I can't say any of the per se, or most of it per se was written. I think there are elements that were written before the destruction of the temple, but most of it would be written after the fact, in a sense. So the same with the Old Testament, though there may have been parts of it that were before exile. The fact that we don't have any proof that there is any, we can't say per se that any of it necessarily was written in a time prior to when it's said to be written. And they always talk about a certain preeminence. This is something Adam experienced. It's often associated as a blessing and a favoritism. And this had been applied by the Deuteronomists to be nationalistic, such that Moses is the intermediary for the nation, but it was really Aaron who was the original Israelite. Um, the original anointed Israelite, and but this gets into a history of the Judeans would be for the king, the Davidic king, and Solomon, because Solomon had all these guys under the yoke. Like Solomon's empire stretched all the way to Tyre, which was Tyre and Sidon, and all the way down to supposedly the Red Sea is what they would say. And when it comes to this preeminence, this is like, I mean, kind of maybe where the story of Samson comes from. You have this strong man, the Superman, who necessarily didn't live on by having some pure children. I mean, similarly to the story of Judah, he necessarily didn't have pure children, because if you look at Ezra 9, they never cast out any of the Idumeans, and same with Nehemiah 13, but they do record, finding some scrolls. But can we necessarily believe that the Babylonians, after seizing everything and marching the people uphill quite a ways, they let them have all those scrolls, to keep those scrolls in their possession, and so just kind of thinking that the people that were cast out and stuff, they also were of different nations, and that's part of the story. Ezra cast out people of the different nations, but the thing is, they were mixed and married between them, and they were divorced at one time. But what about the prior generations before then? And even so, it's kind of contradictory, that they say Zerah, the seed, and they would say, like in Numbers, you have all those blessings and stuff coming to, the seed. And so it shouldn't matter in this definition who the mother is, but it seems to be they like Hagar were cast out. And so I don't know if the story of Hagar, I kind of wonder if the original Israelites only had the story of Ishmael, and that the Deuteronomists added back into it the story of Isaac, to focus on this idea of the promise. And this is how, according to like Mishnah and stuff, this is how Isaac is the story of tabernacles. And the story of tabernacles, Margaret Barker was alluding to, was that this is a story like when when my man Jesus Christ came into Jerusalem, they say Hosanna, Hosanna, and the palms and stuff. And so this idea of the priesthood and the original temple when the tribes were united, this is, like Revelation 7, Revelation 14, but those are the heavenly versions of what happened on earth. On earth, there were people that did recognize Jesus as the Christ when he had this triumphant entry into Jerusalem. This was approaching Jerusalem. So this was probably in Bethany, where there were, and the name Messiah is closely related to this temple that Solomon had built in Bethany. And so Bethany was kind of an anti-mountain, and it was used for those intents and purposes deliberately in the story, where the wars between the sons of David and even Saul, David and Absalom. David even went to this mountain, and Solomon eventually turned it into a place for the foreigners, because his wives, but his wife, one in particular, who may have been Ethiopian according to Septuagint, was kind of maybe who in the Song of Songs, was personification of wisdom. And this gets into the menorah. And so they would say they don't have the menorah, they don't use the menorah, because that was actually associated with the earliest Canaanitish, Israelitish traditions. And this is something that existed from a time period earlier when the Asiatics ruled Egypt. And so you have this amulet of this scarab, where this was used by these Hyksos to as like a good luck charm, because that represented the destruction by their god of the Egyptians. And so a lot of what's Asiatic culture, like the eye with like the curly thing, the down thing, that looks very Asiatic, And when you have the rulership of Egypt, I'm not talking about the old kingdom, but some of the later ones had been influenced, maybe originally from the king marrying the pharaoh marrying a priest's daughter, and that's how Joseph kind of gets in, is not like kind of like he did with Esau, how Jacob did with Esau, like feigning like, hey, I'm your servant, but really that's it's kind of like with Esther, it's like, hey, I'm your servant, but really it's to get control. And this happened the same with like the Maccabees. They ended up losing so much power that they married their daughter to the Herods, and the Herods might be where a lot of these biblical stories come from, because you go to Dead Sea Scrolls, they don't predate the Herodians. Like most of them are written, a lot of them, a good deal of them are written in Herodian script, and they're probably compiled at the same time. So we can't necessarily date them to earlier than the Herodian period per se. Even if a couple of them are written in Paleo, that might have just been what they were doing, not necessarily what had happened long ago and collected for a later date. But so is Superman dead? Is Superman dead? Is the question. And the answer is yes. He was killed by Doomsday. And I don't know if Doomsday was like made of kryptonite or something, but whatever happened, he was able to kill Superman. Superman came back from the dead, I think, is what happened, but that's neither here nor there, because the resurrection is something we talk about quite often on this channel, so we don't need to get into that here. But Superman is a comic from 1938, and he was on, I can't remember, was he on DC or something? I think, but DC is Detective Comics, and Detective Comics were created by Welcome Wheeler Nicholson, and this bloke was kind of a Lawrence of Arabian looking guy. He was like a kind of merchant marine or something. I don't know. He served in the Coast Guard or something way back in the 1920s or something. Who knows? And they have these golems that they're creating, eventually, but they kind of don't, I don't know, trace back to a superhero like before Popeye, And so Popeye too is like a kind of merchant marine. He's like a sailor, so under like the Monroe Doctrine and the Rough Riders, you got all these sailors who are doing some Coast Guard stuff or something, but meanwhile they're hooked up with merchants. You got like the East India Company and the West India Company, and there's probably like a Dutch Indian Company, and the United States went Dutch for a while. That's what the whole Boston Tea Party thing was about. And you have, but the Boston Tea Party was, of course, much earlier, so they probably wasn't like an East Indian, West Indian Company. I don't know. That's not the point here. The point is about where does the superhero come from? Like Samson, where does that idea come from? Like, where's this idea of a superhero? They probably, like with Popeye, like I was saying, a certain nationalistic. Of course, with Samson, there's a nationalistic. Hercules, same. There's because like I think Hercules, rid the Athens of, I don't know, like some sort of he rid Athens of some sort of like beasts or demons or something, and that's these tropes of a strong man. You can't take over a house without first tying up the strong man. So Jesus is our strong man because he defeated death. But where does this idea of Superman come from? Like, people try to tell you that Superman is just like the most preeminent superhero, like that before Superman, like that this is just some sort of genius thing, like that it didn't come from this earth, really, like meaning that creativity comes from taking different ideas from different parts and finding a new use for it. Like Henry Ford took different component parts that already existed and found good use for them. And like, let's say, who's that one dude who flew over the Atlantic? His baby went missing or something, and there's a ransom. But Charles Lindbergh, he just had idea of things that already existed, combined them, and dreamed a possibility and made it happen. And so these aren't people who invented per se, just like invented the wheel and then invented the car door, and next thing you know, it's like a whole car. It's like they take things that other people have invented that are exist, but like that's how they'll have you thinking about Superman. That, like, same with like monotheism. They'll have you think like, oh, the preeminent people invented monotheism and we have them to thank for it. Not that anybody ever had such a thought in all history before that. And they must be getting it from God himself, that God revealed how he is, and that's how we know. But Margaret Barker has been talking a lot about the candelabra is a tree of life, and that's the Sephiroth, that's the other part of God, like the wisdom, the physical parts, and you have the same with Superman. They'll have you tell you that, oh, Simon and Schuster, they invented Superman, and they've changed all comics forever, because before that DC was just Detective Comics. It was real dudes, so, but like long before that, like the 1920s, they had Popeye. They had a guy with super strength. He might have not have been handsome or whatever, but though I guess the American ideal didn't find that to be favorable. Like, it's the guy that looks skinny, that's been working hard. That's why he's got the big arms from out pulling all that rope, big hands. And you have Popeye. After that, you have somebody created in 1930 called, so that Superman in 1938, back in 1930, you have somebody called Hugo Danner. And Hugo Danner is where all these guys come from. Like, they're still using this idea all the time. Kids will say, oh yeah, this superhero got this power because some doctor injected him with a serum, or the government injected him with a serum. And so I guess Hugo Danner's father worked for the government and injected his embryo with the serum. And I don't remember what happened. I guess he grew up on a farm and was able to grab pigs with one hand and throw them around or something. And by the time he got to college, he was just like a stud. And he played for like Harvard's football team until he like creamed some dude and busted him into halves. And then he was like, oh, I gotta use this for good. So he went and fought the Germans or something in World War I or something, and was just like a super, super effective warrior. And but he was like a really good guy, so he would like save people all the time. And that was independent of DC. It was independent of, like, there was no such thing as Marvel. Marvel didn't exist, and Marvel was even taken from like Foster Productions or something, publications, where you have some dude who was called Shazam, and Shazam was like Solomon, Hercules, all blah blah blah, like all these Superman from lore and of yore, and you have it's just like Superman, but you say Shazam, and it's not that he's an alien, it's just that he's a 12-year-old. So these are just different ways of making Superman. Was it a serum? Was it a magic word? Was it he was alien? But the hero is rather similar. And Marvel was Shazam. His name was Captain Marvel. And Stan Lee, I can't remember his real name, Stan Leibowitz or whatever. He created Marvel from that word, Captain Marvel. And but I kind of like the idea of a serum better, and I also like the idea of a magic word better than alien. Like that's always been my beef with Superman. Like so what? Like why is he on Earth? Like why is he helping? But this is very similar to the Jewish story under Esther. It's like even though you have a plan, I don't know if he's got a plan, maybe it's destroyed or whatever. But if you have Zerubbabel and all those guys, Joshua, Jesus, go back to the temple. I don't know, I'm talking like Ben Shapiro, but then why do you have this story of it's like, oh, we can't go back to our land. You kidnapped us and we're stuck here and now you hate us, and so we have to change our identity, have a secret identity, change our names, when it's like the original hatred wasn't like all the nations hating this one nation. It's God hated Esau. It's that the people that were the second took the identity of the first, and so you have the second being this theme, this motif recurs figuratively throughout the Genesis story and beyond, but this is very true through Ezekiel and different things. But you have the story of Lazarus. Like Lazarus is kind of like cast down. He's underground. He's burning in heck. But there's a chasm where Abraham is on the good side and he's protecting his people. But that, according to Margaret Barker, that the Abrahamic promise was the original promise, and the Deuteronomic covenant is coming secondly or after that. And so for this reason, you have like the firstborn being cast out. You have Aaron's sons. You have Esau. You have these people that are sent into wilderness, and this is how they are finally, it makes sense, east of Eden. This isn't the Philistines to the west. This is to the east. This is the Syrian desert, which nobody lives in because you can't live in a desert. So you got to get the water from like the rivers and stuff like that. So that's the people of Assyria. And this is how they got the script of Ezra, the square script. That's not to say that any of the pronunciations or words that exist today are either before or after that, but the square script coming from the times of Ezra and had been used throughout the the Sassanid Empire, because the Persians that controlled much of the world, especially for the Peloponnesian War, would have really coveted that land, Canaan, and have made a claim to it, and they continued to use languages that were familiar to people such as the Nabateans and what have you. So by the time of like 200 AD, let's say, like, Galilee of the Gentiles was not speaking no Hebrew, like this was people were writing left to right, and I mean these people are playing off each other on opposite sides of the Mediterranean for a long time before this, when all the beef was between north to south before it became east to west, and the battle lines before the Islamic conquest, where the Semitic languages took back over, were drawn way throughout Syria. The West was controlled Syria, and so you have these different sources for Superman. Superman wasn't just pulled out of thin air. Even though Superman has been hugely influential, like a lot of Superman is very famous. Like Simon & Schuster's creation has lived on, like, as a household name to billions of people, But I never really cared for like the Superman movies. It reminds me of like Maleficent. It's like Maleficent. The beef is that she's a different race of people. She's a wholly different race of people, and yeah, she can help people. She's hard to get along with, but she can even love a human, like her daughter. But like she's it's based off of Sleeping Beauty, and in Sleeping Beauty, she's not a nuanced character. She's just bad, and there's no one like her. She's one of a kind, But if you like in Maleficent, you have like a race of witch people or whatever with the horns that can fly and have superpowers, and I don't know if it's because their god is with them or something, but they have these like magic powers, like Superman. Superman's like got magic powers, and there was a guy in DC Comics that was created by Simon & Schuster before Superman. So there's different elements from them that go into Superman, and Slam and other people that were part of the created characters that they were working on before Superman were part of Detective Comics. Simon & Schuster were employed by Malcolm Wheeler Nicholson, and they had some side projects too. They were working on this guy named Dr. Occult in 1935 on more fun comics. So we know that DC Comics was older than 1935, because why would it be called More Fun Comics? But Dr. Occult in 1935 is his powers are astral projection. I think Maleficent had that. Hypnosis, aka Jedi mind tricks, And that's how like Ezra writes. It's like so biased, so crafty, that it's like every word is, you're not sure if it's true or false, but it's biased. And people will treat this book as being the word of God, and not that God would want to expose how people were thinking, but that God wanted that Ezra's like speaking for God when Ezra doesn't even claim to. And like, remember, Joseph Smith doesn't claim to be speaking for God. He Muhammad doesn't claim to be speaking for God. He's saying he's a messenger, that he's found these writings, and he's relaying them to the people. And this is the job of the prophet. And the prophet is after the failure of the kings. This is a later invention. So Moses is sending away Aaron. Like, Aaron has less of a importance when the king, like, says, let's say Herod. You have, like, in the time before this, the priests beating the Maccabees were the kings, but then you have, in the days of Herod, somebody who, let's say, is ruddy, from way down in Ramah or wherever, like, is way down in Ephrath, or Kiryat Arba, or wherever he's from. He's somehow like the anointed king, and now the anointing is no longer for the priest, such as the Maccabees, but has to be their daughter given to the king. So this is Jedi's are very much based on this. Like, Jedi's have hypnosis, Jedi mind tricks. They have telekinesis, another power of the Doctor Occult. Illusion creating. The mystic symbol of the seven, trademark. Mystic symbol of the seven, trademark. A talisman. I don't know if this is like an ephod or a Thuman, or like Teraphim, or I don't know, probably a scarab, but that's what Dr. Colt does. And Dr. Colt is part going in Superman, along with some of their other characters who were these kind of super brains, who had high intelligence that could use that to their advantage, which is kind of opposite of a hero. A hero, it uses their superpowers to help other people. And the most extreme version is Moon Knight. And this is because the original Israelites were not a moon cult. They even worship the sun. It says in Mishnah, our fathers, when they were in this place, turned their backs to the Lord and their faces toward the east. And this was the religion of different places around there, like Heliopolis in Egypt was a sun worship. This is Jupiter, Zeus Pater. This is Father God. Well, the moon god of the Yahwehist is quite the opposite. It's a lunar god, and they'll base their whole calendar on the moon. And both Semitic calendars and U.S. calendars, with the exception of Islamic calendars, are both lunar and solar. I guess you can say, in a way, the Islamic calendar is a little bit solar, but they're just varying degrees. We have months. We do have months, but we don't base our calendar on the months. We base our calendar on the year. So you have two competing waves, and they're opposite. Remember, like Jacob and Esau, they're um, Ishmael, wild. They're at each other's neck. They're fighting. This is a later interpolation. If you look at like Jeremiah and stuff, when you have this later involvement of Egypt, and Ishmael coming up, again, and revisited, um, Ezra laying a claim to Kiryat Arba. And so you have one group that's replacing the prior group and excluding everyone else. When this is not Torah, this is anti-Torah, because Torah said that there was all these people that came with them, such as Ruth. Not Ruth, that's not Torah, but Ruth did go with them, but that's not Torah. But the mixed multitude. And it's become, I don't know when, per se, increasingly exclusionist. To the point where now it's like, why would you want to join us? They will hate you. They will hate you. You will be poor. Wait, bro, everyone loves you and you're rich. LeBron James just was at your house last week. So Moon Knight is based on this guy Khonshu, who is the Egyptian god of the moon, and Ra, the Egyptian god of the sun. And so the original monotheism is like this sort of dualism, like that there's good and bad, and this was throughout Persia in the form of Zoroastrianism and Hinduism, and you'll have the destructive forces and creative forces. Khonshu is saying he doesn't have an avatar. All these gods have avatars, and these avatars, I don't know if they're those guys you see in the Egyptian walls. They got like a bird head and human body, and alligator head, human body. This is like the opposite of Persian. So they're playing off each other as opposites. You have like Persian, you have like the Lamassu, and they might be both Persian, but one's like a different time. You have like this first being, remember it says our fathers when they were in this place turned their backs to the Lord. So it's like this is a motif that occurs throughout the Bible. It's like the first was not chosen, the second is favored. Well, Paul uses that to talk about the Gentiles, and then goes to call the Gentiles Israel. But you have so there's a reversal. I think there's a Psalm, I want to say 118, that is quoted in the New Testament. This is the doing of the Lord, and it is good in His eyes. In Daniel 4, you have a lot of this, that if the Persians took power from the Babylonians, it's because God chose the Persians. That's who gives power. And Paul says in Romans 13 to honor your leaders because that God's in charge of powers and principalities. So Moon Knight, he's got this power. He's got secret identity, and you think he's just like a dorky guy, but he's actually powered by his god, Khonshu, the moon god. And Khonshu claiming he doesn't have an avatar, but he's got his messiah there that's, doing everything by his power. And but they got to flip on the scarab. Like they have the scarab belonging to the other gods. And he can't get along with anybody. He basically got kicked out of the council. And I don't know. It was a Marvel thing. I thought we were talking about DC. But that's comics before you. They're golems. They're ideas put into form. That's a lot of what mankind is. The story of Adam, which is the story of Aaron, who is the story of Lazarus, and Ezra isn't really the Deuteronomist per se, because I would say Ezra is a lot like the Maccabees, where it's not just the king, he's coming as the priest. This is what Judas Maccabeus did. Judas Maccabeus is saying, I'm Judean, I'm a priest, and therefore, like, I'm the king. And I'm getting a little twisted, so that's why I want to leave it. So, peace out.